wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is Two Parents, Two Perspectives. What to do when your parenting styles clash.
So juicy.
I know.
And you know what makes this so juicy is it seriously because we put a question out in our private Facebook group because we were talking about how we're going to record a podcast on this kind of theme.
Yeah.
Seriously, like within a few hours, there were like over 30 comments of different,
I know,
like ways to take a conversation, which just tells us it's such a hot button issue.
Yes. So we have a selection of those questions that we've kind of mushed together, and we hope to do them and our listeners some justice in breaking down what this looks like and how you can roll with it being a conscious mama.
Yeah.
So before we do that, we'd love to remind you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe. On the homepage, you'll just see a little red strip that says, press this button to join our tribe. Once a fortnight, we send you a wrap-up email with everything we've put out in the world with links so you can pick and choose where you'd love to dive deeper. And occasionally we send you a more intimate email kind of breaking down some sort of epiphany or awakening. Bridget and I have had a conversation between ourselves that maybe we're not quite ready to put out on socials.
The ones that could get us in trouble on socials maybe is more of a way to put it.
So jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to get more nourishing of your mother during the week.
Yes.
Okay, now Bridget, I don't know about your notes, but mine are like cray. So I was like smashing down as I've got, 20 minutes before the baby wakes up.
You were doing it at swimming or
I
something
split
like
it
that.
up. Yeah, you saw that on Insta stories. I split it up. Sorry, I went through like 30 gajillion messages that we had in that thread in the members group and smacked out what I thought were the main themes.
Yeah.
And thought I'll come back to it to review what I want to go to. And so then I took my daughter to swimming lessons tonight, which was the first time because she's just moved to after school time. So I left the baby with the teenagers and took her on my own. I was like, great, I'm going to use this half an hour to smack out answers. And it is resulted in a scrawling page
of,
that I pray to God I can read. So forgive me if it's a little bit jumbled around. But yours, Bridget, looks a little bit more concise.
I did
than
mine before Pilates, so I had like not many distractions and I could kind of be methodical, but that doesn't mean it's going to come out that way. I similarly tried to find commonalities, which was amazing how many people were like, me too, oh my God, you're my mirror, or oh my God, I could have written this.
Yes,
so it's nice to hear
you're not alone.
You're not alone, right? And that we're sort of in various ways working through the same kind of stuff.
Totes.
So I guess we'll just dive in.
Yeah, just start.
Yeah.
Start with your number one and I'll try and locate it on my number one and let's just kind of piece it together that way. What do you think?
So I guess we'll kick off with one of them was, how do you arrive, at a mutual understanding with your partner if you have really different parenting styles? So perhaps you've got, your partner or husband who is, what you might term a more disrespectful authoritarian, and they might term you the lenient, conscious parent, which I'm familiar with because my husband has a bit of a story sometimes on how I'm too lenient or how I just don't have enough boundaries, which I find super fascinating because that only comes up at moments of stress when he's feeling stressed. And I can see that when the roles switch, which they do, and I will ask every listener to pay attention to when your roles flip in your family, the moment I'm the fucking like hardcore, it's bedtime. We are doing a very firm bedtime rhythm now that I have a school and I'm counting down to another baby and I have a middle child now, who is not sleeping and has not really slept through the night more than 5 times. So I am now like, we need to get sleep hygiene as a top priority. So now my husband almost feels like another child whipped into the mix because I'm trying to whip him into line. So I'm pretty sure in those moments he is not going to call me the lenient one. Right? So it is interesting as soon as we start to look at the labels we've got on each other.
Well, everything's in conservation, right?
Yeah.
So when you're one thing, they're the other. other.
Yeah, right.
And to the same polarity that balances that out like a seesaw. And it will flip.
Yeah.
And you will be the opposite.
Yeah.
And so will they.
And I can see it. I can see, and you would know this too, because I know you get into control.
Oh, totally. I like 100% own that.
and your partner, and I reckon listeners must be like laughing along with this, because it's true. Like if you get into like hyper, like I need to control like everything, they almost can feel like they're being controlled too.
Yeah.
Your partner can, which can be, emasculating, and they can struggle with that. But it is interesting to look at if your dynamic traditionally has a label on it of like, you being
one's lenient and one's
tough love. Tough.
Yeah.
It won't always be that way.
Yeah, look, I had that down here too. So I had that as well. So one parent is labelled as too lenient and loves at all costs.
Yes.
And the other parent is labelled as disrespectful and uses tough love, which usually results in something like there's no awareness or space brought to tears or crying. It's labelled as silly or suki la la kind of stuff. And ultimately behaviour management moves to threats.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can totally see this dynamic, playing out. I actually think it plays out. And the reason I don't judge it now is because I can see myself. So I would say that I don't like the word lenient. Let's just say I don't like that.
Yeah.
But I do say love at all costs. Yeah. So I'm saying, how can I stay open in pain? How can I love more? How can I love for longer? How can I stay here and make it safe for me for longer, rather than getting wrapped up in my own stuff and, shutting the door on that. But I can totally see when I'm the opposite as well. And I don't want to disown my shadow, because I can see when she comes up to bite. And it's usually when I haven't paid enough attention to myself and I've let my boundaries go and I've ignored my own needs. And now the disciplinarian is coming out with a firecracker because there's nothing left. And
the disciplinarian comes out like that because you're in self-preservation mode.
Yes.
You're in like, I've got nothing left, so I can't handle a foot out of line here.
Yes. And so I actually now have compassion for when I see that, because I actually can empathize on some level how that feels, to feel so out of control that I have to, on my inner world, that it causes me to control even further my outer world. And we hash this out and we're all very comfortable with it in terms of cleaning, right? The more you need a clean house is the more chaotic it is on the inside.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I can do something on the outside, it soothes or band-aids my inside.
Totally.
So I can see parenting playing out this way too. And so I don't judge it. I just watch it with curiosity and I wonder what's going on for this
it's really a feedback. And I think when it becomes like perhaps a constant way of being, then I would say that parent likely their nervous system is really, that's where they're at. Like their nervous system was primed for that in childhood, and that their own children are putting them straight back there, and that is their level of safety. Like that is the level of safety for them, and that will also be why it's very difficult for them to understand your view, because there's just no safety for them in the way that you see things, because it is so out of control for them. And to look at the child in your partner, because it's the child parenting, in this desire to be the adult,
to be in control. Is because they were out of control when they were kids and had none handed over. Yeah. So here's their chance to be the perpetrator and heal the unhealed experience, right? Is to play out the opposite. So if you were underpowered in childhood, you will play out the power in the adulthood in the exact same mirrored situation. So it is totally fascinating, and I love that you've said see the child in this human, because that's what it is. And I often think this is the time to not to, I don't know what the word is, not to separate further and make that them and me. Which you will have to almost fight yourself not to do. Yeah, it's us against you. Particularly when conscious parenting is such a high value for you. They are,
almost harming you by their disrespect to your values here. But when you can see the child in them, you can open your heart to their challenge, open your heart to their story, see the God in them, I suppose, as opposed to seeing all that's wrong and that needs fixing.
Yeah, I think that. And I just think this is the time where I would hope, and this was my number one that I had on a lot of these questions as I'd written them down, was for me, I see it as this is the task of relationship, right? Is that if we really saw relationship as a vehicle to our growth, then our relationship will take us exactly where we need to go. Now, that is the relationship of parent and child, but that is the relationship of lovers as well, and larger family dynamics. So why is it that you're being taken to the feelings that are being triggered by your partner doing the thing that they're doing? Because they're only playing out the perfect behavior in order to trigger the perfect feelings in you to take you exactly where you need to go for growth.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I know that's a bit of a trip.
No, but it's totally true, right? And as I was reading them too, I was thinking, like, we think so much that, like, you know, we're told, right, like as children, we're cultured to believe our parents have like the 411 on everything. Like, you know, our parents have got it nailed. And so then we become parents and we sometimes forget that, oh, actually we're really human too. And just as our children are growing, we're growing alongside them and our relationship's growing alongside them. And in our relationship, we're constantly rubbing up against each other, not always in the way that we want, you know.
We're all children, right?
So as if we're not going to continue to face this mirror of discomfort through our partner. It's by design and it's there and it's necessary. And to your point, how do I open more to this?
That's literally what I had here was, so when I'm triggered in these moments, how do I love harder? How do I stay open and in pain longer? I still think that is a lifelong practice.
Me too.
So I had that. I also had, if you're in this conscious versus authoritarian kind of mindset, then I would be looking at, I would say to you to do, as we do in our group, do the drawbacks and the benefits of conscious parenting, because we often only want to see it one way. It's all good.
Yeah.
Well, there's a drawback too, or lots. And what are the benefits and drawbacks to an authoritarian style of parenting or growing up within a family in which that's demonstrated?
Yeah.
To actually spend the time to consciously force your brain beyond the box that you currently have it in until you can come to a point of gratitude where you can go, okay, I can actually see that the human that is created from both these dynamics is perfect for this world. So once you can remove the polarity and the charge that you have emotionally about them and me, us and them, the inner wounding stories that it brings up that forces you on this conscious parenting journey, when you can kind of sit in a place of love for why they're there and how they've served you, and you can see through a more godly view of how it's all actually perfect, then I think you're free to choose. Yeah. And that is a very different place from parenting through fear and wounding.
Yes. Yeah. And from parenting through soothing your own inner child.
Yes. So I think when you're able, and honestly, I think that's not just like smack it out in one day, good, done, sorted. I kind of think this is a spiritual practice. Yeah. If parenting for you is a top value, which it is if you're listening to this podcast, then you're going to experience your greatest triggers, your greatest pain, your greatest achievement, and your greatest desire to hang in there in that area. Right?
Yeah.
So this is a daily practice. Every time I hit a new trigger with my partner, with my children, I'm constantly making my mind look further than where my body wants to take me.
Yeah.
Because that's what the interplay between the two, right? Your body remembers what your mind forgets.
Yeah.
And your mind can take your body to places it can't go on its own. So there's a dynamic. And if you stay in your head, you're dead. And if you stay in your body, you're stuck, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And you stay in your body and you're just going to continue to repattern, essentially.
Yeah.
Like you'll just continue to re-experience that childhood stuff.
So I think you've got to be willing to do both. And I think, honestly, if it starts with, I can't handle it when he does that or she does that, then you've got to start still with what are the feelings this is triggering in me? Where have they come from? Where have I felt them before? Why are they here? What is it repatterning for me? Because the dynamic doesn't need to be here if you don't need it. On some level,
say that again.
You need it.
The dynamic does not need to be here if you don't need it.
If you don't need it, right? Which is super painful.
Yeah.
But whatever it's triggering is exactly where you're trying to, or your higher self is trying to bring your conscious awareness to. It's your next growth area. It's painful.
Well, yeah.
But you can do it. And you can do it by still bringing it back to self. You know, what is the story that you have attached to this person, to the traits they're displaying? What is the story you have from your childhood on that? What is the wounding that is yet still seeking more evolutions of healing? How can you disentangle your inner child from what you're witnessing to be able to love harder and more consciously? You know?
Yeah. I'm thinking as you're saying these things about personal story and what we each can bring to this, because like I've just been away on holiday and I always find it interesting what holidays bring up, because you know, a holiday for
as
a
you
family,
said, you can't holiday from yourself.
no,
can you?
right? And like family holidays, it's just like a melting pot of like growth for the family, because you are in each other's pockets. You learn more about each other more intimately, and that brings joy and expansion and also pain and discomfort. And I was watching my husband, because you know he doesn't spend 24/7 with the kids like I do. And I've heard some men say, I don't know how my wife does it, you know, like after having experienced that. And I could see him getting so triggered. And I see, particularly with the age my son's becoming, like he's only 6, and like that's such a pivotal time for the development of a boy. And for my husband, that was a really pivotal time for him and his own growth in relationship to the masculine relationship, to his relationship with his dad. And so I can see more buttons being pushed. And it's so fascinating to me to observe it, and at the same time observe my own triggers in terms of how I would see him sometimes respond. And that's a feedback for me on what I value, one, and then also where I'm projecting onto him what those values are, and where I'm able to open up to the child in him, and where I'm feeling myself closed down, and how can I be more here with him and love him as he has to grow through this re-experiencing of his own childhood through his son, and love it even if it wasn't the way I would have had dealt with something, you know, because the longer that you do this, and you would say this, the longer you're in this motherhood game and this motherhood, you know, journey of expansion and spiritual development through our children, the more humility and softness you can bring to yourself, because you are taken to more edges, you know, and you have more what we might term bad days where you have to forgive yourself and you have to, you know, pick yourself up again. And so in turn, the more that you can be gentle on yourself, the more that you can be gentle on your partner too, for what they have been called to grow through in this. Because it's fucking brutal sometimes. You know, and I could see all of the edges that my son was taking my husband to. And at one point, because I like look at things from a developmental lens, and I look at things from the dynamic, like things that I'm paying a lot of attention. It's high value. And so at one point, my husband was like, I can't even say anything. I feel like I have to hold back all of this, you know, because it'll be wrong, or like, you know, I just can't say the right thing. And I said to him, I want you to be authentic. I said, but at the same time, don't think I don't always also hold back stuff. But I said, it's a conscious choice for me to repattern what wants to come out of my mouth with what I know is more of a mindful, conscious approach to what I want to come out of my mouth. Because half the shit that wants to come out is patterned bullshit from my childhood that I don't really want to repattern. So I'm making conscious choice. And I said, this is like a profession for me. So if you consider this like your job, which you have to get better at to continue to excel at and to continue to have an impact with, I'm going to call myself to high regard with it, which means I'm probably going to do the same to you, whether you like it or not. And that's going to be because we cannot avoid projecting our values onto others. We just can't. Like we can become aware of it, and we will be forced to become aware of it because they'll get pissed off at us. Like, you know, it's just like your kids, right? You try to make your kids do what you want to do. They're going to tell you to get fucked in their own way because you're trying to make them do what you want to do. And that's not in their values. So we will get feedback from our partner when we are trying too much to make them like us. And that's good. We want that. We help learn to communicate better from that. But it also helps us be authentic because I'm not also going to deny the fact that this is a value for me. I want to raise kids who are really connected to themselves and feel valued and respected so that they go on to value and respect others. You know, it's not like but different people have different views on what raising kids like that looks like. So, and very often parents with very differing parenting styles actually both want the same outcome, but see a very different way of getting there. And that's when it's the conversation. That's when it's, how can I open more to what's triggering me here with my partner so that we can see more of each other's perspective, so that we can enter into this with less emotional charge and more resolution to a shared outcome, as opposed to two people trying to get to the same thing but just trigger, bouncing off each other, you know?
Oh, so freaking good, Bridget. I cannot wipe the smile off my face. I love it.
You're sitting over there like, you know.
I know. Just like, tell me more.
But I wonder too, because you really have a big story on, you know, like years ago, like soothe, right?
Oh, yeah. And also dragging my husband's ass through conscious parenting.
Yeah.
Right, again, two completely different perspectives.
So what did because he would have had to do things that really triggered you.
Oh, yeah, and still does.
And so what does those stories look like for you? And what's the feedback for you? Because is he like breaking your one-sidedness, or like is there a looping pattern around when that shows up for you?
Golly gosh, I wasn't prepared for that question, Bridget.
It just came out. You don't have to, I'm just putting it out
I don't have a problem answering it. I just feel like I actually need to think about it more probably than what time this podcast has. I always think I have a very high value on relationship also. Yeah. So having a high value on family and a high value on relationship, I force myself, dare I say, place myself in moments of growth consciously.
Which means extreme discomfort often.
It means extreme discomfort often. No, it does.
Yeah.
And it means showing up rather than shying away.
Yeah.
So whenever I want to cringe, close down, shy away, brush over, distract and move from, I say to myself, breathe into it, Julie.
Oh, God, I can feel how excruciating it is.
I know. And I literally kind of do this in my head. It's like this visualization of the balloon puffing out, and I imagine my breasts just swelling beyond me.
Taking people out.
Well, I'm going to bosom this to mother this space, you know. And so my enormous bosom breasts will enter the space of my husband's.
My feminine wiles.
Yes. I'm sure he feels my bosom's entering before I do. It's like, no, I'm sorry, I've never said that to him. It's probably an overshare. But in my head, that is what happens. And so I really do think relationship 101 is communication.
Yeah.
And it's showing up with everything you are, knowing that it will likely trigger the other person. And knowing that you are creating safety for you to be more you when you do that. And the more you commit and honor to being more you, the more they love you harder. Because we become less lovable when we become the same.
Yeah, it's true.
And you maintain intrigue and desire and mystery when you are more self. So that doesn't mean living, you know, parallel lives and we happen to share some children. That means holding on to my sense of self and what is important in my world and my values and my growth, knowing and entering that relationship knowing I am designed to push his edges and he is designed to push mine. And that is not dysfunctional. That is, in fact, functional. And the more you can sit in discomfort, the more intimate a relationship is. So that's probably the summation of the things I've learned the most of having a really conscious and evolving long-term monogamous relationship. So what I've learned from that is how to have conversations about really edgy things and come out of it feeling togetherness and we're on the same page-ness.
Ish.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't have to. And I also have to realize, because I am a control freak, which just spirals from feeling so out of control in my childhood, I also have to realize that it can't be all my way. You know, and out of Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, what's the, I want it now, Daddy.
Veruca Salt.
Yeah. So I feel like I can get a bit like that, but in parenting.
Needs to be like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I also self-check my own, as you say, self-righteousness, because we are that in our top values.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to realize there's perfection in it not being perfect for me, because that's still a spiritual practice of growth for me.
Yeah.
And I consciously, daily, if I'm in that, self-check what benefits my children are getting from experiencing his, or if my relationship looked different, her genius.
Yeah.
Her experience of life and what they get from that. Because I'm not perfect. Don't have the corner market on perfection here. So I'm mad to think that if it's my way, it's going to be right. So I actually think that there is a lot of value in having regular conversations and pulling your partner along with you on those conversations rather than assuming it's too much, too hard, they're not interested, whatever the case may be. I've also learned to have less intense, long conversations and more chatting over coffee conversations that are kind of almost like drip fed.
Yeah.
And that certainly changes our dynamic because
that's what my husband responds most.
Yeah.
It's all those little things that, because he doesn't, I would say probably adores me and who I am and how I am to the world. But he doesn't want me to present that to him. He doesn't want me to present the I could write a book on what I know here. That's not what he wants to hear, But the little bits here and there of checking in, of reflecting, of, notice this, blah, blah, blah. That's good. And it's relationship building because it's communicating the way he wants to be communicated with. Without me, like you and I both know, without us forcing our way of how we think it should be.
And the less you need that polarity, the less it'll show up too, right? So the more I work on my own polarity, the more unconsciously his will morph or hers, whatever the case your relationship.
And I find it really interesting when you look at the masculine feminine dynamics. I know if I slip into my masculine in parenting,
he's in his feminine. He
is just soft and flowy, and there's nothing that they can do that's not just delicious. He's not just liquid around, you know. Whereas, and when he's like that, I'm like, are you serious? I'll have my moments of being like, come on, come on, mush. I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
We're on this path right now.
Yeah, totally.
And, similarly, when he's like that, I will be the come here and, into my soft embrace, and there's time for all of your feelings, and, we ebb and flow in that.
Yeah, so it is about stacking the evidence for where you are that and where they are that and where they're the opposite of what you want to say that they are too. So in the traits that are obviously you're seeing as triggering in them, it's a self-ownership, it's the mirror, right? Yeah. Where am I equally and to the same degree those traits? Because you are, but often you can't see your own self.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's the people closest to you. Well, often it's the people closest to you that are going to tell you, wow, here's where you're that thing.
And it's really uncomfortable.
Ouch.
It's uncomfortable to hear that, especially if you do have a self-righteousness around something, which, we do on a house phase. I remember my husband saying something to me, again, like getting exasperated, saying, it's okay for you to say that, but if I do it, like, you'll jump down my throat. You know, so that's also his perception of my, like, you know, big value on this, and me having the right way, except in moments when I can't handle it, you know? And those are difficult things to own sometimes, but deeply humbling. And when you truly own it, you soften and have greater connection with them, because you then have that humble conversation of like reflection, which is what I do. And you open up the safety with them to have that with you too, which models for your children. It's safe to make mistakes and repair and, you know, make everyone's many edges and challenges safe within this family to explore and communicate, which is what we want.
Yeah, it is what we want. So I think communication is key. I think coming up with action plans for future situations, I also actually think is a really good idea. So for me, that might look like, oh, you know, Lola's going through this thing at the moment, so here's how I'd kind of like to be able to roll with that. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I think maybe is under it, but I'm not really sure. Here's how I'd like to roll with it. And I do know more. So there has to be a level of, I know this was a question that came up was when you feel like you're doing it all or you have to do it all or you're the one that's parenting it all, is seeing where if it's your top value and it's your area of genius, you're going to be the go-to person because you're the one who's trudging ahead, forging a path, going this way. Yeah. Come along with me because it's your top value and your life trajectory. And
you're the one who's directing time and reading. You're the one, and you know, if you can't make them read an article or listen to something, it's because they just don't value it enough. So if you want them to come on board with you, it is about, as you say, like action planning it for them. Yes. And stepping it out.
It is, but then it is also about seeing where you're not all over everything all of the time as much as you want to say you are and play the martyr. I'm sorry, I know, because I do that.
Yeah.
And I have to literally look for consciously the evidence where my partner takes the lead and I simply follow. Because it can be so easy. We look for our stories.
Yeah.
We
have such a bias towards them.
We have such a bias that we literally filter our world in which to confirm that which we already believe. So then we can go, told you so. And sit in our own little self-righteousness going, yeah. I'm right. Yeah. No pain here for me because I'm all good.
Oh, God.
So I just think if this is your top value and it is not your partner's, it's okay to go, right, all right. So how are we going to roll with this? What is it that I would desperately love to see as base values in our family? And how can I communicate those to my partner in their values or in an aligned, as you were saying, an aligned value that has different forms? We both want a really successful family. What does that look like for you? What does that look like for me? What does that look like daily? What does that look like in 12 months? What does that look like in 5 years? And so how do we achieve those goals, taking into consideration what you value most in this world and your genius and what I value most in this world and my genius? And can we actually be respectful enough to do both?
Yeah.
So I do think it does come back to putting on your big girl pants a bit and going, all right, I am willing to captain this ship. But that doesn't mean I have to do everything. That means I choose consciously where I spend my time, my energy, my love, not draining it over all of the shoulds and diluting what's left. That's choosing very cautiously and wisely where you spend those very precious resources. And I think when you can do that and you can really see how lit up, inspired and perfect that is for you, you don't need to judge another person for doing just that. And you don't need to feel the need to prove that you can have or do everything, you know, be all over it all.
Yeah. Because what story is that just confirming for you and who is that proving something to you? Because if it's depleting you, it's not working.
Yeah.
You know, it's you stuck.
It is when you're stuck. So let's reflect back on notes. I feel like we've gone on a gajillion tangents.
We kind of have.
Okay, what have you got next?
Another one was struggling to stay grounded in your own values. So if you really value conscious parenting and your partner doesn't so much, how do you stay grounded in what you really value as opposed to taking on the values of your partner or falling back into how you were parented?
Yep.
Which, is part of, again, that relationship dance of, are you being too careful around them and almost like morphing yourself to be okay in their eyes? Which is a classic childhood pattern playing out.
It's actually what I had written down too, was then you're running what love equals conforming. Like, what's the story here? I'll give up pieces of myself in order to be loved by you. Where has that come from?
It's a big one. And if you're looking at it from a mirror point of view, you're on the edge of growth here. And what are you going to do with it? Like, are you going to stay in your authentic values and you're going to, conjure up the power in your voice to stay in that place and continue to value what clearly is important to you? How can you be? And how can you look at, shared values and the voids that your partner likely has to be coming at parenting from the way that they're coming at it, to then open those lines of communication, like we've talked about.
We have talked about it. I also wrote down here something that I ask myself when we're in those moments and we're triggered, we're seeking a perspective flip, we're getting stuck into old ways of being, is asking myself, recognizing first has to be awareness when you're stepping out of your authentic self and when you're in it. So just recognizing how that feels in your body, because it does feel different.
Yeah.
And then being willing for when you're out of authentic alignment to be able to ask yourself, what's going on for me right now in that moment?
Yeah.
And being able to listen to your body enough. Is this me or is this from somewhere else? Is this someone else? And then choosing how you proceed from there. Because if you're trying to shrink yourself to conform to someone else, it's a much harder battle, that internal one, than doing the very thing that you never had the tools to do when you were a child and step into that without needing to be unsafe.
Yeah,
so, I do think that's worth visiting, as along with the story of, I need to give up pieces of me in order to be loved by you.
Another one was the, conscious parenting versus falling into unconscious parenting. So where we, are shocked, I suppose, by our own unconsciousness and what we do there. And I had some notes here around that's also helping us integrate our shadow, right? It's helping us to see that we are always both things. We are always both consciousness and unconsciousness. And we need to develop a growing awareness of where we're unconscious, because that's where we see our next path to grow. And if we try to disown those parts, and if we try to be always positive, always one way, the other side that we're breeding grows insurmountable almost and ready to explode, because we're only trying to be like a one-sided person. And the more we try to be like that, likely the more our partner will show up with the opposite if we're not facing that within ourselves. So it's, again, this dynamic at play and this two sides of the same coin, I suppose. And the shadow that we have, like this, what we want to say is our shadow, our unconscious, our parts that we deny. We're never going to be done with that. So it's better to get curious with it and learn to love it and see what's coming up for us as an opportunity for integration, not disownment, not disowning of
parts.
Yeah.
The other one that I thought was interesting we had down here was another clash, which was when you see your partner as putting themselves first and you see you as putting your children first. And so you've got a whole lot of labels around how they don't care, they're lazy, they put themselves first. And perhaps that motivates you to strive even harder to prove how last on the list you are.
How much of a martyr you are for the family, or
and it creates so much resentment for your partner for doing the exact thing you secretly want to be able to do, but can't consciously own the fact that there's selfishness in motherhood.
Yeah.
and they will bring that mirror to you until you own it.
God, yes.
They will breed that resentment for you until you're like, fuck this shit, now I'm taking it back.
Yeah.
That's why it's there. So, you know, how perfect that your partner is displaying this. It's taking you exactly where your soul is asking you to grow. What is it teaching you? How can you step into doing that thing that you judge or that it is calling you in towards consciously, so you don't need to continue to breed the story and the resentment that eventually turns into enough anger that it motivates you to do the very thing you never thought you would.
that you never thought you were.
Yeah.
Because the more you label them and disown them, the more it's just parts of you that you're not willing to see and integrate.
Well, you can damn you breed, attract, or become, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating.
You and I did that like massively years ago, didn't we, on our husbands? You know, in terms of what we labeled as lazy or.
Totally.
You know, we'd like judge their values, and it's fucking humbling. It's been such a good practice, right?
I still think it's a daily practice.
Oh, it's a practice, absolutely. And, you know, and if it wasn't, then your relationship's not growing. You know, like it needs to take you to edges.
Actually, the last one I have, Bridget, before we move on, because I know we're going for a while, is the teaching your partner thing. I know you touched on it before, but when your parent feel like you're parenting or your partner feels
nagging.
Yeah, or that you're having to parent your partner in order to parent or something, you know, along those sorts of dynamics. Part of, I guess, the whole that you have to do it alone thing.
Yeah.
But that you might be, you know, telling them to do it differently or remind them about certain things. And I loved your analogy around, but this is my job, right? This is how important, because obviously your partner's job is massively important and a huge value. So you're trying to speak in his values. And this is the same for me to get better and bigger. Here's the growth that it calls me into. Totally get it. But I was also thinking, I wonder what sort of label you have, if that's a dynamic you find yourself in, on being a know-it-all.
Yeah.
Or potentially being the parentified child, so the child who parented the parent.
My story has really been not knowing enough. Because I have a really high value on learning, because I have a perception of not knowing enough. So there is like a self-righteousness that comes with needing to know and knowing that I know, you know.
Knowing that you know.
Yeah. Until I realize that I don't know.
But how perfect is that? Because you're disempowered in I'm not enough. Yeah. So you overcompensate and then get super proud about what you know. Yeah. Like it's the perfect counterbalancing emotion.
Yeah. But because I need to know, because I also know conversely how much I don't know, which fuels my need to know. Yeah. So it keeps me in a constant state of inquiry. And I think also probably my husband knows that, and knows that I have a ferocious desire to know things, that can be overwhelming, because there's just so much, and he'll often like put himself down in certain areas because he compares himself to that. But that's just my way. He has an enormous amount of knowledge in other things that I have zero interest in having knowledge in, you know? Yeah. So that's just nuances of our dynamic playing out, that plays out in this, you know, incidentally parenting thing, which I have high value on. Yeah, yeah. So we're always like, you know, like seeking to fulfill something. You know, it'll be deep. It'll be deep for us.
Yeah. And I do kind of get that. I get that. I think I have that dynamic with my husband, in that sometimes I feel like I parent him. I can see the wounded child in him. Yeah. And there's part of me that's not sure if I quite enjoy that.
Oh, yeah, right. Because you're not masculine enough for me. You're not kind
it's
of.
almost like a sexual fetish, isn't it? In a way.
Yeah. And then I also think, I mean, this is like a side diversion, but I was trying to do all of our like financial stuff. And so I really love money and finances, but there's a point at which when it gets too mathematical, I get massively triggered into my childhood wounds around not understanding maths. And so he was trying to help me, because he's a genius at maths and spreadsheets and that kind of stuff, on the weekend. And I just spontaneously started crying and said, I can't do this. Like I can't figure this out. And I was having like a dominoes of like different timelines of my life, like grade 4 in the classroom, trying to, you know, like I was just, they were all like flicking it, and then, you know, year 10, year 11,
I think
those stats. And
dominoes happen though when you're collapsing something.
Well, yeah, right. And it was amazing, because in that moment I saw how healing it was for him, because he also has a story on my intelligence and my smartness, right? So he was able to comfort me in a wound that's big for me and be the one who knew more and could hold the space knowing that he had this covered, you know? And I think that when we can have that humility in our relationship to know how much we're each just growing, it opens our heart so much more to the potential within each other to deepen, you know, our connection. And then when we can do that with each other, we can do it with our kids. When we can be okay to feel into those places of you know, pain, what connection is there? And it was just a great reminder because I just thought, gosh, like, you know, we think that we've got someone like covered, you know, we think that we've kind of got people nailed, but we don't. Like, we've just got our own projections onto them of wherever we're missing. And the more we can open with curiosity, the more we can see, and the more we're able to open our heart to the love that's always there. And I find that really quite beautiful.
It is really beautiful. I think that's a good place to leave it.
Yeah. Sure. We've been going for ages. I know. It took my time.
But we also feel like there was so much in this and so many questions that we're also completely aware that there may be more specific, nuanced points that you'd like us to be more specific and honed on. So if that is you, please PM us, please message on any of the socials or email us through our website. And we would really love to definitely have that conversation maybe next week's podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a cool
to
idea.
actually stretch that out a little bit further with you, because we definitely want to take you where you want to go. And we do also, it would be perfect timing because we have Aligned Parenting live round starts on Monday.
On the 11th,
yeah, don't forget we do have 12-month payment plans on Aligned Parenting. So if you're like, I really want to do it and I need all your help, or guidance, but I can't fork it out right now, then there's definitely monthly payment plans. So please check that out at nourishingthemother.com.au on the homepage.
And if any of these, like, you know, once we touched on it, they're going to show up again in that facilitated group, because so many of the mamas who gave us these questions and topics are going to be in that live round. So this comes up again, and I even liken that domino effect of collapsing things. It happens all the time in our groups, because those perfect examples of, oh my God, yes, and you've just helped me see this, and
I've just had an epiphany,
you know, like all of that, like it's just this perfect culmination of story and
there's
expansion.
and there's so much power and wisdom in a group, right? So beyond that, just I think as we move year to year through Aligned Parenting, we realise how much wisdom and layering there is within family dynamics, and certainly relationships seem to be a place of immense pain, but in fact hold the capacity for our greatest areas of growth, and that when we perceive relationship to be something where the dysfunction is functional, that it is an area in which we can move through to greater alignment and knowing of self, rather than feeling as if it's the opposite. So your world is conspiring for you, not against you. Join us for Aligned Parenting.
Yes. And as we said, to connect with us, it's nourishingthemother.com.au, and to connect with you, Jules,
is thepleasurenutritionist.com, and you, Bridge,
suburbansandcastles.com. Remember to nourish the mother to rock the family. And
we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.